Hello, I'm Dr. Lisa College. Welcome to Culture by Neurodesign. Well, it's a time of year when every parent is spending a lot of time helping their children to settle back into school. I think it's a challenging time of year for all children, but we need to pay extra attention to our son, who's autistic and who also has learning difficulties. So he attends a special needs school for children who have various different conditions, but all of those conditions lead them to having learning difficulties. Now, one of the ways that the school helps their students to learn is by reducing the amount of change, reducing the amount of uncertainty that they experience. And the reason is that the more the children need to deal with new or unexpected situations, the less energy they have to focus and to learn. So one example is that whereas regular primary schools here in the Netherlands always finish at lunchtime on Wednesdays and later on the other 4 school days, Chris's special needs school finishes at exactly the same time every day. Another example is that there are only 3 levels in the school. Like, he doesn't go up a group every school year like my daughter does, but instead he moves more slowly from the lower to the middle to the upper school, and every group has multiple ages of children, and every year some flow in and some flow out and some stay, so you dilute the change and provide additional stability. Now, even so, last year when Chris did change groups for the first time, it took him until about the autumn break, which is perhaps 7 or 8 weeks after the start of school, until he settled down. Now, I'm sharing these examples for a couple of reasons. One is to illustrate how high the cost of change, the cost of unexpectedness is to an autistic person's energy and focus. Now, we're all getting better at preparing Chris for change, and he is getting better at managing it. So things look much smoother from the outside. But even though it looks smooth, all that preparation and all that managing comes with a high energy cost. All of us get tired and frustrated, and we don't always have the same attention for other things. The second reason that I'm sharing these examples is because they are extreme in Chris's case, they clearly show the cost. We can see it, but it's a cost that all of us have to some extent when we're in situations that aren't a natural fit to us. So the reason that I decided to talk about this topic in my podcast today is that this plays out in our teams for everyone. When people constantly have to fit, constantly have to adapt to a way of working that's far away from how they would choose to work if they had the option, then it's not possible for them to be fully focused on their work, to be as productive and as present and as inventive as they may wish to be, because some of their energy is going on adapting to a working system that just doesn't suit them very well. And all of these little leaks of energy, they build up to a massive drain. Or if you turn it around, they build up to a huge opportunity to boost your performance, to boost your impact. To do more with less, more growth, more innovation, more change. We really can't afford these leaks. So let me get back to Chris. Now, of course, the whole school can't be perfectly suited to Chris, just like a team working culture can't be perfectly suited to each team member. But any little thing that we can do to reduce the mismatch between Chris's perfect school environment and the actual school environment that we're asking him to operate in is a win. Less of his focus and energy gets wasted. More of his energy and focus is available for learning, to read and to write and add up and share out. When a mismatch can't be changed, or when we didn't see it, then he also has much more mental buffer available to cope with it. So we found that it's definitely worth doing whatever we can to make the fit closer. And worth doing means happier. He's looking forward more to school. He's focusing better on learning. He's playing more nicely with other children. Also at home, it's nicer, it's more fun, it's more interactive. It's easier to go to places with him and with his sister, it's easier to get him to sleep. So the difference isn't only in learning at school, it's also in his interactions with others, both at home and at school. And there's also a difference in his mental health. And if you apply this to a similar situation in the working environment, then not only is someone autistic or allistic, which is a fancy word for not autistic, not only is someone better able to focus on their work, they're also a better team player because they've got more energy to focus on connections. And of course, the benefits also go through to their personal life. So I said that any little thing that we can do to reduce the mismatch between Chris's perfect school environment and the actual school environment is a win. So what do we do? Well, in the introductory meeting with his teachers, we share tips that we've learned over Chris's whole life. We share those tips with people who are just getting to know him. And a lot of the discussion is focused on how best to communicate with him so that information is provided in a way that will let him learn the best that he can. So what I'll do in the rest of this podcast is to share a couple of the tips that we give to Chris's teachers to communicate most effectively with him. If we think about reducing mismatches and reducing energy drains in the workplace, and communication is also the best starting point that you have. Communication underpins everything, and it's portable, regardless of whether you're communicating with your team or your clients. Now, if this resonates, I'll be unpacking it a bit more in my free 30-minute session on the 9th of October. The link's in the notes if you want to grab a spot. Now let me get back to this podcast. Autistic people often describe experiencing the world in fragments. Right? They'll see leaves and branches before recognizing that it's a tree. Now, it can take my son several seconds to process new information, to link it to what he already knows, and to work out how to respond. Now, we all manage new information in this way, but usually the processing time is quick and we don't notice it. But with autistic minds, especially young autistic minds, the processing time is often visible, which gives us the opportunity to learn really valuable lessons about how to communicate more effectively with everyone, which is a great way to reduce those energy drains and point that energy to making impact instead. And we definitely all need that these days with all of the disruptions in restructuring and changing expectations amongst our employees and clients that we're all experiencing. And we all experience situations that are more similar to the world of an autistic person when we're tired, when we're stressed, when we're in unfamiliar environments. In those situations, we can rely less on our mental autopilot. So the communication skills that are inspired by autism benefit everyone. So as I said, I'm now going to share, I'm not going to share all of the tips that I discuss with my son's teachers, but I'll make a selection of 2 to illustrate what I mean. So the first is to be explicit about what you mean. Now, sometimes these days explicit means rude, but I don't mean rude. I mean explicit as the opposite of implicit, as in you say or you write exactly what you want to say or write, and you don't rely on hints or body language or other social cues which need interpreting. So my son doesn't easily understand these non-verbal signals, and in fact they make it harder for him to grasp what is being said because they add extra information that his brain tries to process, which distracts him from the core message. So much of his focus then gets taken up with trying to untangle what it is that you're saying, that there's very little, if anything, left for action. So for example, if you raise an eyebrow to indicate that you're joking and you expect him to understand the opposite of what you're saying, then you will certainly fail to communicate what it is that you want to communicate to him. Another example, if I say, as I often seem to do, it's messy in here, then he may well agree that it is messy in here, but he won't tidy up. He doesn't understand the request that I implied, and instead I have to say, it's messy in here, let's tidy up. One more example. If I say, don't leave your plate on the table, well, he might put it on the sofa instead. Well, he's done what I asked, but it's not what I meant. But instead, I have to be specific. Please don't leave your plate on the table. Put your plate in the kitchen instead. So this is something that he will keep getting better at as we practice and as he gets older. But it's always something that will take him effort to do, even if it's not visible. And that's effort which could be going somewhere else. Now, in the people that you work with, you likely have autistic people to whom this is directly relevant, but you may also have people who weren't looking at you when you raised your eyebrow, or who need extra processing time because they are speaking their second language, or who are tired, or who don't know your personal style well enough to be certain that they've interpreted you properly. So relying on body language, relying on implicit hints is a waste of energy, focus, it's a waste of potential impact. Now, as I was preparing this example, it made me think of another example of when I worked in corporate and was leading a collaboration with academic influencers. The collaboration was with British academic influencers, and the British do a lot of hinting, meaning communicating in subtext. So one of the corporate team had suggested a direction of travel that wasn't the direction that the collaborators wanted to take. But what the influencers actually said was something like, I really value your ideas and I've been interested to think about them. But if we have the time, I'd like to consider a few other routes with the group. Right, so my Dutch teammate, Dutch are much more direct than the British, and he was also speaking a second language. My Dutch teammate saw, I value your ideas. This is interesting, only if we have time, which we didn't really. And he wanted to just proceed, right? But as a Brit, for me, there were massive alarm bells going off in this email that I saw. So interesting is often a red flag to a Brit. That's an interesting perspective, means that you probably need to rethink. And there are other signals too in the sentences that I read, but the signals are so implicit and you need to know how to read them, that it just wasn't clear to my teammate. So not being able to read those signals would at the very least have wasted time, and at worst would have derailed the collaboration. That wasted time and that potential derailment, they are energy leaks. And all these energy leaks add up to missed impact. So this is one good tip from Autism Inclusion to refocus churn on impact. The second example I'll share with you that I discuss with my son's teachers is reducing the amount of questions that we ask him. I only ask a question when it really is a question. And this is a habit that I have found really difficult to break, because British people speak in questions quite often. It's a way of being polite, but they're often not really questions. So, Chris, shall we get your shoes and coat on and go to school? That's not really a question. What I mean is, now it's time to get your shoes and coat on and go to school. But Chris can quite rightly answer, no. Even if he is ready to go to school, I have also now given him two things to do. Right? He needs to understand what I'm saying, first of all, and secondly, he needs to work out what his answer is going to be. It's wasted effort, it's wasted time. Now, we all do this all the time in our personal lives and workplaces. And the example that I've given may feel trivial, but just notice today how many times you get asked a question which is not really a question. That's much easier than noticing how often you do it yourself, because for most of us, it's a natural way to talk and it's hard to notice it. I said it was a really hard habit to break. So notice how often you get asked a question that is not really a question, and think about the quiet, invisible leak of your focus from other things that goes on to working out what the fake question asker actually means. In teams under pressure, all of that wasted processing is energy that could be fueling results, that could be fueling impact. So there you go, 2 examples of energy drain that we can clearly see in an autistic child, because you can observe the delay and the confusion and the outcomes that you didn't want. And even though it's not visible, these energy drains happen in all of us in the workplace. And although they've always been a waste, it's especially in this working life that we all have at the moment, with all the disruptions and all the reorganizations and doing more with less budget and the same number of people or fewer people, that we really can't afford these energy drains. We need to redirect them to productivity and to impact. And what I'm sharing in this podcast are examples to illustrate that neurodivergence inclusion is a wonderful framework to fix these leaks and take all of that lost energy and lost focus and turn it into visible, measurable results, especially now with AI disruption. Remember, restructures, the pressure to deliver more with less. We can't afford to let this wasted energy slip through our fingers. Please join me on the 9th of October for a free 30-minute session where I'll share case studies and my FIT framework, which is a simple set of guardrails which you can use straight away to design for diverse neurostyles in your team, amongst your stakeholders and amongst your clients. You will learn how to start to spot hidden energy leaks and redirect them into visible and measurable impact. And I'll even explain the difference between neurodivergence and neurodiversity. The registration link is in the notes. Thanks for listening.